people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
News.
Okay, we'll start with this. An interesting exchange between the two lightweight champions, Carolyn Dubois and Terry Harper. Carolyn said, very disappointed in Terry Harper for turning down big money for our fight. She does not want it. To which Terry Harper responded, I'm a 3-weight world champion and $200,000 for an all-British unification on 7 weeks' notice is not enough money for me to risk my health making that weight. From what I remember, my promoter offered Boxer twice that for the Natasha Jonas rematch. Pay me my worth with fair notice, and you have a fight.
7 weeks.
Would seem to me that Carolyn Dubois and the people at Boxer were trying to catch Terry with her pants down. Only 7 weeks notice for only $200K. I would have expected something bigger, a bigger offer. Say $250, $350.
They must have thought that Terry was desperate, strapped for cash or something.
Carolyn responded by saying, you are a coward. This excuse is lame. What you looking for, girl? Retirement money? You do know there are bigger paychecks to come from beating me. By the way, Terry Harper, it was $250K. I don't know how you got around mixing up your numbers. I would love to know how much you got for your last fight.
It's a false equivalency argument.
How so?
Terry Harper's last fight was not a unification match, and Terry Harper in her last fight was the challenger, not the champion, so whatever she got was based on that. These circumstances would be different, and whatever she got on her own side of the street. You want her to cross over to yours, you have to pay to play, with more notice than just 7 weeks.
We are paying her more. $250,000 is a substantial amount of money, especially in the women's game. Ask her how much she got for her last one. I'd bet my house it wasn't over $150,000.
Well, she wasn't a champion in her last one. She wasn't a reigning champion facing a champion in her last fight. It's a false equivalency argument.
Carolyn continued, bear in mind, she's coming off of 2 knockout losses and 2 draws. Let's be real here. She is nowhere near the girl she used to be, but she is a name, therefore we are offering accordingly.
She's not coming off of 2 losses, she's coming off a win. A win over unbeaten champion Rhiannon Dixon.
To call her a coward after having fought the best fighters at 130 and 154 and at least one at 147, Terry Harper deserves a lot better than that. Twitter user that goes by the name Paul Gregory stated, try putting some respect on Terry Harper's name. Pay her what she's worth and give her the right time in camp. Then it's a fair fight. Might as well tell Terry to come in with her hands tied. To which Carolyn responded, oh brother, the fight goes 5 rounds. Honestly, she's worth 150 and that's pushing it.
Disrespectful.
The other lightweight champion, IBF champion of Brazil, Beatriz Ferreira, decided to join in the fun saying, hi Carolyn, did you forget that I'm IBF World Lightweight Champion? The Beast is always ready. If you want a unification fight, there will be no Sweet Caroline that night. Give Eddie Hearn a call, and we can make the fight. We'll notice that Carolyn Dubois was not so Johnny on the spot to respond, to acknowledge Beatriz Ferreira. It's strange to see Carolyn, who I do think is talented, tuck her tail so easily at the first sight of Beatriz Ferreira. Here she is calling Terry Harper a coward while she herself tucks her tail. She went silent. When Beatrice joined the conversation, Carolyn went silent. Didn't even want to acknowledge her.
She tried to keep the focus on Terry, saying, Terry, you do not hear how ridiculous you sound right now. 7 weeks ain't enough time? I thought you were a professional athlete, posting training videos every day. How much time do you need, girl? 3 months? Geez, girl, I ain't that scary.
To which Beatrice responded, you're right, Carolyn, you're not scary. A friend told me you were offered a fight with me on the Eubank vs. Ben card in April, a unification fight for you in your hometown with 14 weeks to prepare, but you said no. Anyway, we can do it March 7th. The Beast. is always ready.
So let's get down to brass tacks. I completely understand why Carolyn Dubois is pursuing Terry Harper. Not just because Terry has a belt, but because Terry has a name. I get it. I understand. But you can't stand on the pulpit accusing Terry of being a coward because she's not in a rush to fight you when you're not in a rush to fight Beatrice. The only other champion at this weight, at this time, that if you're so eager for a unification match, Beatrice is right there. And it's getting more and more noticeable that Carolyn doesn't fancy that fight. She doesn't want it. Terry turned down $200,000 to fight you? Offer Beatrice that same $200,000. See what she says. She doesn't want to know.
Choose your words more wisely when you're talking about Terry. Coward is not the word that I would use to describe young Terry Harper, who, if she were the coward you're making her out to be, well, I don't think she would have fought Sandy Ryan at 147.
You're pretending you want all the smoke from all the champions at 135. It's just an act. Whenever Beatrice is brought up, Carolyn clams up. And it's getting more obvious to more people.
She's a lot more strategic than she lets on. I think this is where Katie Taylor was different than a lot of the other fighters, the younger fighters that are coming through now. When she was in pursuit of Undisputed at 135 pounds, she wanted to smoke with everybody, anybody, even the fearsome Delphine Persoon at 140. First fight she had up there was against Christina Lenardatu, who had already beat Alicia Baumgartner.
A hard puncher and an explosive fighter.
Katie didn't hesitate to fight her in spite of the risks. Same way she didn't hesitate to fight Chantel Cameron. After the Amanda Serrano rematch fell through, first person she went to was Chantel Cameron.
And that's where Katie was different. Carolyn is talented. I'm not saying that she isn't. But she ain't got Katie Taylor's heart or her desire to measure herself against the best, whoever they might be.
However dangerous it is, she's a lot more selective, a lot more specific about who she wants. And it's very obvious. I'm starting to wonder if she'll ever fight Beatrice Ferreira.
Keith.
Of champion.
Show's over.
I was a
It's
seven-time
over.
national champion.
Show's over, Keith. It's over. It's over now. It's finished.
The show has just begun, my
It's all
friend,
over.
and you're the
It's all
first
over.
opening
You're-
act.
you're
And you're going to get a big welcoming
looking-
slap.
you're-
I promise you,
You're
kid.
looking for tune-up
I
fights.
promise
and when you're doing that. It's
You got
over.
dropped. You got dropped 2 fights ago. You got stopped. You got knocked out, kid. I've never been knocked out in a fight against any of the world champions.
It's
The
all
greatest
over.
amongst the greats.
The time is up.
You will-
You've had your time. You had your one time.
You will not handle 5 rounds. Guaranteed.
It's over.
You're just a child to me,
You had
son.
your one time.
You're
an
an
old man to me.
amateur.
You're an old man
You're
to
an
me.
amateur.
You're well and truly past it. It's all over.
And just like your daddy, I'm going to give you a good whooping. Just like your I'm going to give you that whooping. How do you say it? Whooping.
Just show up on Australian soil, Keith. I'll feel much better when you get here. You know, I won't worry anymore about you pulling out like you have in the past.
That was one fight. I've pulled out of 2 fights
Correct.
due to 2 injuries. One was a whiplash against Sean Porter, which I gave him the fight and I won. I should have just beat Tim Tszyu one-handed. Y'all saw what happened. It's a big mistake. You mess with the big fish, USA. We run boxing. You don't run boxing. We run boxing. I've been about this life, son. I've been about this life.
Not for 3 years, you haven't.
Only one fight in the last 5. The initial pleasantries have been exchanged between former champion Keith Thurman, 3 years removed from the sport, and Jock Barvis, who is buzzing right now. His star is ascending in the land down under, and he means to use Keith as a stepping stone. Boxing insider Rick Glacier reacted to the news by saying, Keith Thurman fighting on March 12th in Australia. That's only news on a very slow day. And let's see if he actually shows in Australia. I don't trust it.
I don't blame you.
Boxing really can be backwards at times, can it? Because when Keith Thurman was supposed to fight Tim Tszyu, who is a bigger star in Australia, I would say, ahead of that fight than Jock Barvis is ahead of this one, they had Tim come to America.
Remember, Tim had the belt at that time. He was WBO champion.
And you had him fly out to America for Keith Thurman when by all rights it should have been Keith flying out to him.
Should have been.
So that he could end up flying out to Australia anyway for a prospect. What is really just a prospect. That's what Brock is. So I wonder who's going to broadcast this fight in America, because to my knowledge, Brock doesn't have any arrangement with the PBC like Tim Tszyu did.
This is a no-limit promotion show. They're the ones paying to make it happen. It's their party.
I take it that Keith Thurman still has some affiliation with the PBC, as the TGB Promotions insignia is seen on the poster. Are they going to broadcast this here in America via Amazon Prime? Is this going to be one of their non-pay-per-view fights?
The PBC's, because this is a pay-per-view in Australia. This is a no-limit promotions pay-per-view in Australia, but here...
Where do you watch it? The money must have dried up for Keith Thurman to make a resurgence, to make a return to the boxing ring as the away fighter.
Remember that this is a guy who turned down a Terrence Crawford fight.
To then accept a fight with an Aussie boxer who's tantamount to a prospect, likely why he took the fight on. Stands a better chance of beating Brock than he did of beating Terrence. Would have never beat Terrence.
So he didn't accept that, but he did accept this.
No Limit Promotions are the ones paying for this thing, and they're the ones paying Keith. If Keith still has any association with the PBC, a small percentage of his purse may go to them without them having to stake any of their own money.
Spend their own.
They're making their money now outsourcing their fighters. Some do a Turkey LL Sheik show, Keith to a No Limit Promotion show.
Yeah, if he makes it there.
Could you imagine if Keith loses? How the mighty have fallen if Keith Thurman goes to Australia and gets beat or gets stopped by Brock Jarvis. This guy used to be a unified champion. Some considered him one of the best in the world.
For a short while, many years ago.
What is intended to be a segue to a Tim Tszyu showdown, whether it's a segue for Brock or a segue for Keith. This time, I think it'll go down in Australia. That if Keith were to beat Brock and move into a Tim Tszyu fight, they're not going to do it in America, I don't think. I think they do it in Australia.
Where it should be, because Tim is a bigger star in Australia than Keith is in America.
Keith Thurman is not a star in the United States. Even if he used to be one of the somebodies in the sport, he's not those things now.
Nope.
What he represents is the golden era of PBC boxing. In fairness, Keith Thurman did bring them some really good metrics in his time, whether it was with the Sean Porter fight or the Danny Garcia fight.
He really was PBC boxing.
What he represents now is the current state at the PBC. The situation would have deteriorated greatly that now he sees himself traveling for his next paycheck.
That's how bad it's gotten. Those stipends must have dried up.
While he sits in his armchair claiming that America still runs boxing, it's not the Americans paying you now.
It's the Aussies.
Fucking touch me, cunt!
It'll be quite a sight if Keith goes down there, if he actually makes it there, gets laid out, gets beat.
Part of me is looking forward to it, to see what, if anything, Keith Thurman has left.
Men's junior middleweight news, Sebastian Fundora versus Chordale Booker, nearly finalized for March 22nd, PBC on Prime show at the Vegas Michelob Arena.
Errol Spence Jr.'s replacement after dropping out.
Sebastian Fundora is finally within reach of a fight date and an opponent for his first title defense. The ring has learned that Fundora is in advanced talks to defend his unified WBC and WBO junior welterweight titles against Chordale Booker. Once finalized, their scheduled 12-round title fight will headline a March 22nd PBC on Prime show from Michelob Ultra Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. TGB Promotions has a hold on the venue, which is expected to be approved during the next Nevada State Athletic Commission monthly agenda hearing on January 28th at state headquarters in Vegas. The event will mark the PBC's second standalone non-pay-per-view show since entering its deal with Amazon Prime Video. The ring has additionally learned that Elijah Garcia and former title challenger Terrell Gachet will also fight. ESPN.com's Mike Kopinger was the first to report Booker as the potential challenger for Fundora, the ring's number 4 junior middleweight contender in spite of being a unified champion.
Only comes in at number 4.
This potential matchup puts an end to a months-long wait for Fundora, who was long rumored to next face former unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. The bout was teased as early as the post-fight press conference for the Tim Tszyu fight, where Sebastian became a champion.
That was in March of last year. The night of, it will have been roughly a year's time since Sebastian fought.
Errol Spence ultimately confirmed that he was no longer moving forward with the fight, though his replacement was problematic all along. The fight was not going to be approved by the WBO, who cited Spence's inactivity and entering off a July 2023 brutally one-sided knockout loss to Terence Crawford as the reason for not sanctioning that fight. Booker, 23-1 with 11 KOs, fits the part in that regard, even if not the sexiest choice for a title challenger. The 33-year-old southpaw from Stamford, Connecticut, is ranked number 5 at 154 by the WBO, which should clear a path for the fight to be sanctioned. Booker earned that top 5 placement on the strength of a 6-fight winning streak. 5 of the 6 wins have taken place at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, roughly 90 minutes from his hometown. Booker's lone defeat came in a shocking first-round knockout of Austin Ammo Williams in their April 2022 meeting between unbeaten middleweight prospects on the Katie Taylor versus Amanda Serrano undercard at Madison Square Garden in New York City. A move down to junior middle followed, which is attributed to Booker's recent success. Fundora will end a 51-week ring absence with the PBC on Prime headliner. His win over Tszyu headlined the maiden PBC on Prime pay-per-view telecast, an opportunity that came on short notice. He was due to fight on the undercard before he agreed to replace Keith Thurman, who suffered a bicep injury and was forced to withdraw from his plant bout versus Tszyu.
Sebastian stepped in, and the rest, as they say, is history.
While the boxing world is growing more impatient with Sebastian Fundora squatting on those 2 alphabet titles, newly crowned IBF champion Bakram Murtazaliev called him out earlier this month, saying, "Fundora, let's give the fans what they deserve after Ramadan."
Growing more aggressive in his pursuit just a few days ago, he said, "This guy is hiding behind the belts. It's hard to fight a coward."
In fairness, Sebastian has been out a long while, and he does need a tune-up fight. However, you wouldn't have been out a long while if you didn't waste all that time chasing Spence, who you never should have been chasing in the first place, because everybody saw what happened to him.
Thus, the boxing community's patience with Sebastian Fundora is running thin, and time is running out.
I saw Sergey Bohachuk call him out for a fight the other day, but Sergey's got no leverage to get it. He doesn't, but the winner of Ortiz versus Madrimov will.
WBC interim champion. Gonna become his mandatory challenger. And what about the WBO? Currently, Terence Crawford is his mandatory challenger via the WBO, but Terence has got bigger fish to fry. He's en route to a Canelo fight. The next man up is Charles Conwell.
Some would say a more worthy challenger than the guy he's about to fight, than Chordale Booker, in what will be only the second non-pay-per-view show the PBC will have put on in a little over a year's time.
Everything else they did was a pay-per-view, and everything else they're doing is a pay-per-view.
It's not looking good for Sebastian. The walls are closing in. There's a lot of guys that want a piece of him. Heavy is the head that wears the crown, that's what they say. And even if people don't view Sebastian as the consensus #1 junior middleweight in the world, he does have 2 alphabet titles. That's 2 sets of problems.
God forbid Chordale Booker don't beat him and take his 2 alphabet titles. Another shock upset loss like the Brian Mendoza one was.
So what this is them accommodating Sebastian's need for a tune-up fight, but the audience isn't interested in that, and they don't have to be. They don't have to be sympathetic. Nobody wants to see Sebastian fight a guy like this.
This fight is a deviation from everything that's happening within the sport right now. Bigger and better fights are happening that people are interested in.
It's not going to get a lot of attention, so even if it is a non-pay-per-view, well, that's the least you could do.
Who was gonna pay for this?
Just feels like a waste of everybody's time as a result of you wasting yours on Errol Spence.
Should've never went after that guy.